the Unitarian Universalist congregation with no geographical boundary, working toward creating a global spiritual community rooted in profound love, which cultivates wonder, imagination, and the courage to act. Adapting to the COVID-19 pandemic has been difficult for many bricks and mortar congregations. Early on in the pandemic, we were in a unique position to assist many congregations with the transition. We hosted special episodes of The View, provided advice and counseling to religious professionals, and trained congregations for live streaming worship, all while providing robust online programming for our members. From worship to covenant groups, from classes to pastoral care, and from our monthly magazine to our letter writing ministry, we have found ways to build connection and community even through the screen. We have been a model for ministry on the margins, providing services for isolated Unitarian Universalists, becoming a spiritual lifeline for our members in prison, and investing in innovative ministry. We know better than anyone how deep and meaningful connections can be formed even from a distance. Unitarian Universalists have faced many challenges in these times, and we continue to persevere and to fight for justice and equity for all people, especially during moments of crisis. We are proud to be a leader in this faith movement, and we invite you to get involved in our ministry. We strive to be a place where anyone from anywhere can find spiritual refuge anytime they need it. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of the Larger Fellowship. We are so excited to bring you an all-new episode of The View. The View is a weekly Unitarian Universalist talk show discussing important faith-based topics from an anti-racist, anti-oppressive, and multicultural perspective. Every Thursday for the past 7 years, we have welcomed guests from every corner of the world. Our guests are writers, scholars, activists, and religious thought leaders who are shaping Unitarian Universalism and society for the 21st century and beyond. I hope today's show inspires you. Hope it builds your faith. Hope it gives you perspective to see the power of Unitarian Universalism at work in your life. Enjoy the message. Hello, welcome to this week's episode of The View. We might be getting close to 300, I am not sure. I'm Aisha Hauser, and my pronouns are she and her, and I am in the unceded land of the Duwamish people, also known as Seattle, Washington. We are on episode 400. Is that today? Wait, hold up. Today's the 400th episode. I was not even close. That is exciting. Welcome all. Oh, 300. Welcome to The View. I'm going to send this over to Kiana Dene. We have an exciting guest today who we will introduce right after the hosts say hello. And I'm very excited to have Reverend Dr. Sofia Betancourt here with us today. Kiana Dene, how are you? Where are you?
Good morning. Good morning. I am Kiana Dene, for those of you who don't know me, and I am in Ann Arbor, Michigan, the unceded land of the Potawatomi people, worked with the labor of Black and brown bodies. And the weather here is sunny, and if you live here and you don't go outside, it's just a sadness. So please go outside before the snow comes again. It is very possible. And I'm going to pass it to my friend Michael.
Oh, I hope you and I both are done with snow for this winter. Greetings, everyone. Michael Tino joining you from Peekskill, New York, about 35 miles north of New York City in the Hudson Valley, land of the Kitchewan and Wappinger bands of the Lenape Nation, where it is expected to be 87 degrees today, which is just like climate change all over it. Yeah, Peekskill, New York, home of the Facts of Life. I have coffee with Tootie on a regular basis. Fortune, how are you?
I am doing well. I am here in Selinsgrove, Pennsylvania, the home of the Susquehannock people. And yeah, it's hot here too, and we don't quite know what to do with it. This morning, I put air conditioners in windows before I even had coffee. It's April. Yeah, whatever. Yeah, but I'm excited for today's show. So I'm going to hand it back to Aisha, who can tell us read all of the fancy bio stuff.
Yes. So before I introduce Sofia, I want to name that the one and only thing we're going to talk about with UU Roundup, other than all the UU things we're going to spend the rest of the year talking about, is Finding Our Way Home. The annual retreat of religious professionals of color is next week in Atlanta and also online. I will be joining online. My colleagues and dear friends, Kiana Dene and Sofia, among many, many others, will be in Atlanta, Georgia. So the requests that religious professionals of color have next week is just don't email us, don't call us, send us love from afar, and give us time to rest and retreat. I mean, we're already in an apocalypse that we're not going to change, so just give us a week, no matter what's going on. So I'm going to introduce our absolutely amazing guest. We are so excited. The Reverend Dr. Sofia Betancourt is the UUA presidential candidate. And she's a minister, educator, scholar, vocalist, poet, fiber artist, and change maker. Amen and ashe. Her work in the world and her practice of Unitarian Universalism are informed by the belief that building mutual, accountable relationships with one another allows us to live our values more fully every day. As the child of immigrants from Panama and Chile and grandchild of a seventh generation Unitarian, she knows the strength that comes from building lasting community at the meeting point of difference. Oh, I'm just snapping over here. She has served as a religious educator, a parish minister, a seminary professor, interim co-president of the Unitarian Universalist Association, and countless volunteer roles within the association, giving her truly a wide-ranging experience of our dynamic community. She is an unabashed universalist. Hey, the teachings of unearned grace and all-embracing love, relational accountability, and dignity that surpasses all violent forms of oppression lie at the core of her understanding of life, living, and service in faithful community. And Reverend Dr. Betancourt currently lives in the Washington, D.C. area. And Sofia, I adore you. So Sofia, you and I believe the first time we met was in 2008 when Finding Our Way Home used to be the Adopt Retreat. And there were 30 people. We were right outside San Francisco, right, in a convent.
The Mercy Center. It is a combination. There's a place for the sisters who live there, and then it's also a retreat center, and they run the largest spiritual direction training program, multi-faith, in the country.
What is it called?
The Mercy Center. It's in Burlingame, California. Mm-hmm.
If I can say, Sofia, one of my, people will forget what you say. They will never forget how you made them feel. From the second I met you, I felt welcomed, loved, and affirmed. And you didn't know who the fuck was I? And you were just incredibly, just your.
Aisha, that took you 9 seconds. 9 seconds.
Did I say
perfection? Yep.
It minds you giving you a compliment. So welcome. Welcome to The View.
Thank you. Thank you. So much love. Wow, 2008, that's more recent than I would have thought. I feel like we've been in it for a while together. I want to say that I am in the DC area. I'm on the unceded territory of the Piscataway Conoy peoples, which is new for me. I'm used to being in California, in Oakland. Anyway, it's good to see you all. Good morning, beloveds.
So in June of 2023, there will be an election, and you are running for UUA president, and it will be because you served with Reverend Bill Singford and
Dr. Leon Spencer, our beloved.
As interim co-presidents after the teach-in. And one of the jokes I used to make is that my plan was to get 3 Black people to be president of the UUA. So you're welcome. What was that like?
Beautifully done.
I'm curious.
Beautifully done. Oh, goodness. Honestly, it was an incredibly faithful complex experience. You know, I was minding my business on a Sunday morning. That's not fair. That's not really where it started. Tim Atkins called. You know, I think leadership of the UUA was working really hard in that moment. We had an unexpected resignation of a loved leader, right? Really close to an election. We had so many issues that were live. And I think there was this kind of time period of what do we do? You know, it wasn't like we had 3 years left, you know, where we might have had a special election. It would have taken longer to set up a special election than to have the election that was already coming, right, with 3 fierce and phenomenal candidates already underway. I remember Tim Atkins called me to ask me who I thought should be interim or acting UUA president, whatever it was. And I remember I said to him, please don't call me. That was my first response. Yep. And then, I'm going to be honest, I told him that I really thought it should be a white leader. Yeah, I'm glad to say more, which is what I'm hearing from my beloveds off camera. I said that I thought it needed to be a white leader for a couple of reasons. One, no kidding, Dr. Leon Spencer, my mentor, used to tell me, beware when the denomination asks for BIPOC leaders in the middle of a difficult time. Right? He's like, who should actually be holding the work in those moments? And why are they asking you? So I got this phone call. I said, please don't call me. Hearing and holding the advice of my beloved mentor. But also I knew, right, issues of racial identity, racial justice, the long arc of how we do and do not live our values as UUs were really live in that moment. And that question of who should be holding that heat while we try to do really important work that we're here for. It wasn't that we weren't having the conversations we needed to have. It's that anxiety was high. UUs, we sometimes fear losing each other. You know, and so what does it mean to hold the space and to hold the faith in that moment? So I told Tim not to call me, bless him. And he tried. I hear he defended my desire to not receive a phone call with the Board of Trustees. So thank you, Tim. But I was minding my business and I woke up early on a Sunday morning and I checked my email. Don't do this. This is part of overwork. I woke up at probably 5 in the morning in California, which was 8 a.m. Eastern time, and I had an email from Jim Key, may his memory be a blessing. And it just said, I need to talk to you about supporting the presidency of the UUA. Please call me when you can. And I called him and at 5 in the morning in California. And he said to me, I have heard that this is not work you feel is yours to do. But I'm calling to ask if there is, I will never forget this, if there is any part of your calling that includes holding the faith. I mean, so how do you respond?
That's a different question. That's a different question.
It is. Well, but also in some ways it's the question, right? It's the question. So, you know, I'm trying to mind my business. I was like, Jim, I need to pray and talk to my family and think and some other things that I might not say on the phone with our moderator of the Board of Trustees at this time of the morning. But that question, you know, that question is live for me now. Like, what part of your calling is about holding the faith in difficult times? That brought me to a very different answer than who do you think should be an acting president for the next 3 or 4 months? Right, and at that time, I think the board was thinking about having Leon and I support Bill in the role of acting president, which also shifted over time. And so that was a very fast, and also, can we just celebrate the leadership of Starr King School for the ministry? I was in my first year on the core faculty, my first year, and I got to call my dean on a Sunday, and also our president, right, the Reverend Rosemary Gray McNutt, and be like, so hey, I just got this phone call. And to their credit, rather than saying, girl, aren't you in the middle of teaching a class and, you know, running committees and doing things, they said, you must do this.
Wow.
They said, you must do this. Imagine.
Well, they are also people with deep calls to hold our faith.
That's right.
Right? So,
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that question was very live. I mean, so you asked me what that was like, but this is the discernment piece of what that was like. I was in Boston on Tuesday, by the way.
Wow.
Ooh. So,
I mean, sometimes, how many times do you show up? Because that is the need. This is what we do.
Mm-hmm.
Can I ask a question? Just so for me, that's probably right around the doorway that I found back into Unitarian Universalism. I had started in 2000 at First Unitarian Church of Minneapolis doing youth work for 4 years. And then life happened. I did lots of things. And about 5 years ago, 2000, I started hearing little rumblings about what was happening in the faith, but I wasn't attached anywhere yet. And I realized that the three of you were this leadership pod. And I was like, wait a minute, this may not be the you that I remember. Maybe I need to lean back in because something's happening, right? Like something is big when there's three folks who clearly are powerful in their spirit and powerful in their leadership skills are taking the helm of this amazing organization. So it was when I started to lean back in. And I guess I'd really love to hear, Sofia, about how that time transformed you and that time transformed our organization, because you were holding us at a time of great of where there was a lot of healing that needed to happen. A lot was going on. You didn't step into that role by happenstance or like it was a good Sunday. There was a lot going on, like you said. So right. So I want to know, how did that change you and how did our faith get to transform in that short amount of time with the dedicated leadership you all were able to apply?
That's a beautiful question, Kiana Dene. Thank you. Wow, a good Sunday. I want someone to preach on that. It centered me in my love of this faith and my love of Unitarian Universalists. Look, I've been in the ministry for January is the 20th anniversary of my ordination. It's been a minute. And I've been involved in some complicated conversations and difficult moments. I think doing the work of a living tradition, right, asks us to lean into hard, faithful work. But that moment was about holding who we knew we can be, right? Even when things have gone wrong, even when there are hard questions to ask. And let's think about it. We had a Latinx president sitting, our second BIPOC leader, and we were wrestling with questions of racial discrimination and hiring practices. I don't think that was the only thing that was live in that moment, right? Every time there's a conflict with leadership, there is more going on, usually than most of us know. I'm sure there are things I will never know about those months, right? Aisha, I love your framing that this was after the teach-in. Yes, right? We were stirring up questions and history and remembering our inherited traditions and what it asks of us. All of this was live. But really, what I got to experience was UUs unwilling to lose each other, right? Holding fast to tradition. I think it was the Reverend Sean Parker Dennison who said to me, "You just loved us so clearly." And yet, yes, it was a palpable thing. So for all that there was this worry and this anxiety, and of course, look, it is a lot easier to be in the hot seat like that with beloveds who you've worked with for a decade. People sometimes ask me, should every leadership role be a collaborative role? Well, forgive me, but no, please, no. It is so much more work, right, to share leadership roles. And so I find the ones that are the most successful usually build on already existing work relationships where you know what your partner is thinking, what their priorities are, what their gifts are, what the struggles are. We brought 10 years of holding the faith together into those 3 months. There is nothing else that could have prepared us for that work. But I also want to say, wow, UUs held us with faith. Right? Think about how stressed we were in 2017. How much grief. Right? And this is everyone. I think we like to think about this sometimes as like a BIPOC issue. It's not. We've been doing this work for decades. We've actually been doing it for more than a century. And there's grief. How are we still here? Right? But my experience was that you showed up with gratitude, with love, with enough moments of faith in us to listen to possibility, even if it maybe would have sounded outrageous otherwise. People joined us in holding the faith, and I don't think those 3 months would have been possible otherwise. So we don't talk about this a lot, but I want to also lift you youth in general. We showed up, which is part of what gives me faith to say, oh, sure, let me try to do this for 6 years instead of 3 months, right? People met us in the work, and that was powerful and a gift. I know it's changed me. It changes my view of Unitarian Universalism. It changes how I show up and work as a theologian, how I show up in human rights work, how I show up, as an institutionalist. Can I say, I've been a youth minister for 20 years. I believe in the power of institutions. I believe that we're building a structure that holds our values longer than we can in our living. It's not perfect, right? But I'm invested in who we've been, and I'm invested in who we're called to be. I think people forget that sometimes because I'm also so associated with the work of racial justice, as if that is not the natural evolution of the values of our faith.
I just want to, I know other folks probably have questions. I just want to say the thing that you just said, and you said natural evolution, that phrase like made a Tetris noise in my mind, because I think that if we're a living faith, we have to have a natural evolution. We have to be one place and acknowledge that we're going somewhere else, even if we don't know where that somewhere else is. I think that we have to be wheels up and ready to go. I know that sounds weird. We like a faith. I think people are used to a faith that's really grounded and rooted and feels unmovable. But I feel like our faith is this lovingly transient. And I don't know how else to phrase that, except in this moment, those are the words that came out. But I don't mind being transient, because when I see the world is transient, I see things moving and pushing and spinning. And I want to be ready for that and lean into that as a part of the process, as opposed to being a hindrance to process. So I just really, I love this idea of being transient, of being wheels up, of being ready to be transformed. That is something I guess is a central part of my faith, that I get to not have to be who I am right this moment forever. What a gift.
Beautiful. Well, and can we talk about how the idea of transience is a theological inheritance for us? This isn't a new idea. Right, let's go back to Parker and the transient and the permanent in Christianity, when we were defining what Unitarianism even meant. Back, this was a scriptural analysis at the time, but this question, what needs to evolve and change? How are we growing in our faith together? But also, what must we not leave behind? Right? What defines who we are as a people? I think sometimes we hold our theology lightly, as if it was just, something we like casually decided on over tea one day. People died for the religious beliefs that we hold as religious liberals. We martyred people, right? For the freedom to use reason and conscience, for the freedom to analyze scripture for ourselves, for the freedom, right, to lean into the kind of pluralism we experience today. So this transience and permanence, we've been talking about for over 100 years. This is who we are, right? And what it asks of us in the year of Audrey Lord 2023 might be different than what it asked in the middle of abolition, but it is still who we have been. And we need to claim that with pride instead of like accidentally pretending. So I love, right? And I know you are in ministerial formation, transience, yes. It's at the heart of who we are.
I joke that I wear roller skates in this work so I can pivot whenever I need to.
Nice.
Listen, that is excellent. Sofia, I would love to know your thoughts on what the complexity of the discourse that's been alive, especially since 2017, but even before that, this notion that what does it mean to be pluralist? And I mean this kind of rhetorically, but like, what does it mean to be pluralist? Because I had a board president once say to me, well, we don't want to, I have to say this without laughing, we don't want to turn off Trump supporters. And I'm like, I'm not interested in turning them on. I mean, I'm wanting to center UU values, and we're not going to be able to accommodate everyone. And so as, a candidate and UU president, I mean, in what ways do we, I mean, I have my thoughts and answer, but I'd like to know from you, because your love is expansive. It's like energetically something that is so deeply who you are and how you minister, and I feel it. And I also there's also lines not to be crossed when it comes to people's humanity. So I'm curious, as a faith leader, how you have navigated that.
Thank you. I mean, sometimes badly. Just be really honest that we get this wrong, right? And part of our spiritual discipline is to show up anyway and try again. The idea that we can only be in community if we get it right is, I think, one of the most undermining things. And it comes from all sorts of legacies. But for me, this is also about our theology. I think we have a twisted understanding of universalism. It's not, wow, we have to find the easiest common denominator so that everyone is fully served. But it's actually not possible. It's not possible. So, my caveat for not turning off Trump supporters, it's not that I want to center values that are not UU values. It's that I want to model that there's always a pathway into community. That's what universalism means. You don't have to earn grace. You are inherently good. You are inherently sacred and worthy. And that leaves you with some responsibilities to behave as if those things are true. That's not on our theology. And it's not on our individual leaders. It's on us as faithful people. Now, it is on us as leaders to provide resources, containers, support, learning, strategy, all sorts of things to help us live into what is actually a very challenging spiritual calling. But universalism says there's always a way to make amends and to be a fully participating member of community again. It doesn't mean that the community gets derailed every time one person has a bone to pick with an issue. And this is hard for us as liberals because we do love each other. Actually, love is at the center of our faith. We do want to hold people. We want to help people be better than they are. I want to be better than I am, and I want my community to help me with that. The problem is we default into the same people's bettering being our top priority again and again. And the thing is, the rest of us were not put into this faith to be teaching examples for everyone else. We were not meant to be your spiritual fodder. We were not meant to be the inspiration that allows you to be better than you were. We are here to be members of community like everybody else. So our responsibility as a faith is to say no when there is something that reduces our full humanity, and to say, here are the ways back into community when we've gotten it wrong, because we always will. That is universalism. And the problem is we don't study our theology, and we lose our history. And so we think that somehow, like, this is not a PTA meeting, not that those are easy. But this is not just we have to all get along because we're all stuck in the same container. No. Right. Choice is also in our faith tradition. Right? Reason is in our faith tradition. Well, so are some expectations, some covenants, and some behavioral norms. We do not consume each other for a few people to be better UUs.
We do not consume each other. I just need to say that again. We're not here for your consumption.
Right.
And can I just say out loud, I'm big. I'm not made to be small. I said this in a recent sermon. You might choke on me because I'm big. I'm a lot. And I don't know how to reduce myself to be small enough to be palatable for the white gaze or the white comfort. So you need to get a big fork, or a bunch of y'all need to get a fork. I don't really care what you do, but if you need me to be small and consumable, then you're having the wrong conversation with the wrong person.
Yep.
My faith is too big. My work is too big. I have too much to offer to be small. I just can't do it.
Amen. But also, not everybody has to be everybody's cup of tea. It's not like congregational life doesn't work if you don't adore every single member of your congregation. Like, this is not, we are trying to learn how to build an alternative to the violence of everyday life, right? The church, and I use that language intentionally, it's part of religious history. The church is a Protestant concept, comes from the idea that we are meant to model a different kind of society with values, and for some people with God at the center. And it's supposed to be a corrective to what we experience in the world. Does that mean that you are called somehow to have to be able to understand everything about everyone to show up in your values? No. We get to be human, but we have to figure out our relatedness to each other.
I want to make sure other folks who might have questions can jump in, but I want to talk about the word consensus and how can we start to use that word a lot more? Because some of what I hear you talking about, Sofia, is understanding there is going to be some Venn overlap, but there doesn't need to be a collapsing of identity or collapsing of ideas, that there is space in census in knowing you've shared enough and I know enough that I can move forward without anger. So how do we start to talk more about consensus in the work that we're doing to move forward? So yeah, I just want to put, I like consensus.
Mhm. I mean, I have some complicated ideas about consensus. I'm trained as an ethicist. So for me, actually, now you can say my top value is the agreement of the members of community, right? And for some communities, that's true. For some families, that's true, right? There are settings where a simple consensus model makes a lot of sense. But I'm really appreciating the legacy of E in our UUA Board of Trustees of Alandria Williams. May their memory be a blessing. I see in our board the question: are there any blocks to moving forward? Right? It's not always do we have kind of a full, simple consensus. It is, can we, knowing all of those we represent and the values we hold dear, can we move forward in this way? Or is there something that is truly, right, truly problematic within the plans that we have, and then we need to spend more time on? But that's not straight consensus, right? There is there are some nuances in there, and for me as an ethicist, the reason why we express our values, right, a shout out to the Article 2 Study Commission, the reason why we express our values in community is that something has to hold us when it's not an easy answer. Right? You don't need ethics when the outcome is obvious. You need ethics when there are no good answers and you still have to make a decision anyway. And I think that's why we express our values. So this might not be what you're hoping to hear about consensus, but I like a complicated consensus. I like a value system that says we take seriously, right, the places where we tend to default to causing harm and do our work to avoid those. But that doesn't mean that we don't ever move forward, because not everyone in the room agrees. That results in stasis.
At some point, we need to get to a point, and this is part of what I'm hearing you say, Kiana Dene, that if you tell me something is vital to your well-being, even if it doesn't make me 100% comfortable, I have to be okay with us doing that because it's vital to your well-being. And at some point, right. At some point, we have to have enough trust in each other and enough relationship with each other to do what is vital for your well-being, for everyone's, and your well-being and your well-being.
Yes.
I guess I introduced it into the conversation because some of what I'm experiencing on the ground level is folks having this conversation that until everything I believe is 100% validated and enacted on, we're not going to move forward. And I guess I want to move away from this binary all or nothing conversation into how do we accept that there are some things that may not be met in this context, in this frame, in this conversation, but doesn't mean they're not valued. It doesn't mean they're not worthy. It doesn't mean that they won't come up somewhere else. And that the work doesn't stop because somebody's uncomfortable or somebody has sea lioned the conversation, that we have to start looking at other models of agreement, other models of, I won't use the word, democracy is a big one. I feel like that's a too heavy a word to use in the place, but that they're, DC just wrote, there's one or two people who can gum up the whole process. And I want us to get to a place where we're not using that as a weapon, but that we're centering more what I heard Michael talk about, which is, wait a minute, this matters to you. And then it matters to me. And so how can we work through this in a way where our needs can mostly get met, and then we'll work the rest out and move forward. So I guess I'm excited about that possibility being in the ether.
Thank you for that. I know I'm talking a lot, but let me say really quickly something that I think, might be a little controversial, but I think that we have some pastoral care to add to the process, right? I want to honor how much grief is in some of the ideological struggles in our denomination right now. There's profound grief. And so we may not all be of one mind about what the evolution of Unitarian Universalism looks like. But I do think, part of our covenant with one another is care. And when a significant part of our population is expressing grief over something as significant to life as feeling like their faith has been taken away from them. I'm not saying I want to derail our justice work at all, but I do think there is room to acknowledge grief, because it is very hard to get past that place. And if we take seriously that there is always a pathway back into community, then some aspects of I talk a lot about communal care. This is part of communal care, and it's part of what allows us to show up fully in our values in this way. And those things can happen simultaneously, right? It's not that we wait on the one because of the other, but we shouldn't be bypassing the work around support for that grief either. And I think that this is one of those places where call comes into play, right? So for me, if it's racial justice, I actually do a lot of pastoral care here, but maybe that's not my primary job, right? But if it's around gender expression, our trans beloveds, maybe I'm the person who shows up for pastoral care, right? And that's part of how we are co-conspirators to one another in faithful community together, doing the work.
One of the things that one of my learnings after the teach-in in 2017 is I underestimated how much pastoral care white people need. Yeah. And I had to get over my own resentment about that, because part of me wants to be angry about that. Then I read James Baldwin, as I want to lift up Kimberly Hampton, may she also rest in power, who called James Baldwin Brother James. And James Baldwin wrote in The Fire Next Time, in a letter to his nephew, also named James, we won't be free until they are free, and we have to love them. And he was talking about white people. And I think the more the further we get away from the teaching and kind of watching what's happening, especially among white liberals, there is a grief. We can't, this week's CLF newsletter, for those of you who get it in your email, that's literally what I wrote about. Along with healing, there needs to be grief. There needs to be the grieving of a lot of things, right? The society we thought existed, or white liberals thought existed and never existed, not since 1619, right? This society, or really 1492, there's grieving of oppression, right? Of a society this U.S. society that centers cruelty, and I mean there are other societies all over the world that center cruelty. So the pastoral care, Sofia, that you name has definitely been something that I finally, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, I moved into it as a faith leader to say, I underestimated how much pastoral care white people need. And that's okay. And that's important, because we want to be in community, and we want to, there's always a way back. And so my way back was not just to be in a place of disappointment. And the disappointment came from love of this faith, right? And so it wasn't that anger, I don't, because it's not, anger's presenting, but it's always something else, right? It's usually pain. And where is the pain coming from? And it's disappointment. So the pastoral care is not to be underestimated. And it's, we can, to me, it's kind of like the threading the needle. Here's what I want to say. How do we, truly don't have an answer, and I would love to know your answer, Sofia. How do we inspire, support, encourage white people to be connected to themselves in a way that where most want to be in community, in a way that doesn't, start with defensiveness and centering white supremacy? Maybe that's a very big question.
It's a big question. I want to lift that DC put in the chat that anger is pain's bodyguard. Yes.
Ooh.
Yes, absolutely, yes. We talk sometimes in pastoral care about, this is my 2.5 weeks out from COVID brain. What is that word where there's emotion that covers another emotion that you're actually feeling? There's a term for it. Well, anger can be one of these things. Guilt can be one of these things too. Ish, I think that's a powerful question. I really think that's a powerful question. And so for me, it's like, I believe in multiple truths. This comes from Latinx liberation theologies. Multiple things are true at the same time. We don't have to fight about which capital T truth takes supremacy. Actually, many things are true at once. So the need for pastoral care is true. The need to decenter whiteness is true. If you put those two things together, then a very obvious outcome is it is not reasonable to expect non-white people to provide the pastoral care that's needed. So where do you get it? Right? That's just it's not even judgmental. It's like, okay, these things are true at the same time. But one of the things that I think sometimes happens is we actually don't do the pastoral care work. We feel the urgency of the racial justice work. So I want to say that pastoral care for people in any dominant identity position, no matter what the issue is vital to the work of justice. And it should be done by members of the community itself. If we prepare, just like if we are leading worship on a really painful, triggering subject, we usually have extra chaplains in the room. We make sure that people know about how to find you in office hours. We do all of these things. But there is like this historical punitive drive. And again, and actually in some ways we should change topics, because what we're doing right now is centering the needs of white folk in racial justice work. But what if we talk about resourcing just like we would if we were talking about any other deeply painful, life-impacting reality? Right? And so, yeah, that is the work of white folks, or it's the work of cis folks, or it's the work of, economically privileged folks. I mean, there are so many places where we should be doing this work together, accountably, relationally, without asking frontline communities most highly impacted by whatever the injustice is to take care of everyone else, rather than focusing on their own liberation. So in a predominantly white faith, we need those structures. We just do. And we do have a lot of them. And there are people who've been doing the work for a really long time. The problem is most of those people look like me.
And if I can add something, I think I have my audio. I realized I had my headphones set at radio DJ volume, which is not good when they're bone conducting headphones. So I was getting some feedback. And as Aisha often reminds me, the majority of white culture does not know how to live in community, and does not know how to be in touch with our own feelings and our own stuff. Our tendency is to go to individualism. Well, my rights, that's my right. You can't take that away. And we need to relearn how to be in community and say, what is for the health of the community? We need to learn how to decenter ourselves. And can we please decenter ourselves for the rest of this? Because you've been doing all the work centering the needs of the white people. So. Thoughts?
It's so hard. It truly is, because here's the thing. And again, I'm going to go back to Brother James Baldwin. He basically is like, white people need to get their shit together. So it's almost impossible it's not impossible. I'm able to more quickly get to decentering white people when there aren't any white people around. That's just a fact. Even when there aren't white people around, it takes a while. It takes me like a couple, spaces like Finding Our Way Home, or when I'm part of a spiritual direction group that has no white people in it. I've been in it now like 3 years. We almost never center white people anymore because we've come to a place. So it's hard to do. And I've gotten more nuanced about that too, because I think in this, especially in this kind of space, what does that look like, right? Like, okay, so when we started the show, we talked about Finding Our Way Home, the retreat next week. And, how can white folks support us? I mean, not to put too fine a point on it, leave us alone for a week. Like, truly, don't have an emergency. We're not going to fix the dumpster fire that is the world for a week. Like, just let us be. But it's uncomfortable. Like, white people don't know how, I don't want to keep making blanket statements about white people. Some white people don't know how to decenter themselves. I don't know.
Can I push us a little farther, though?
Yeah,
I want us
please.
to decenter whiteness, not white people. Because whiteness crops up in our bi-POC spaces. It's not like we haven't been acculturated to dominant culture norms. How often do we call each other back into community when we are behaving with the urgency of white supremacy culture? I don't want to decenter white people. If I was decentering white people, I wouldn't be in a predominantly white denomination. I want to decenter the mythology of whiteness. And I want to keep all the people.
I think
I'm just gonna write
what
it
you're
down so I
saying
don't
is
forget.
so tender, Sophia, because we haven't always had the skills, the cultural skills, language, or capacity to separate the people from the whiteness. And
Right.
because we don't have the language or the conversation tools, we fall back into the you think I'm racist versus I'm participating in a racist system.
That's right.
So then we get caught in the I didn't do anything personal, so I can't do anything to dismantle the system.
Right.
And then we get stalled. And so I think some of the pastoral care I hear you talking about is and you talked about us understanding our theological history. And some of that is folks understanding their own, I think, Kiana Danae's I statement. I think there's a lot to be gained from people understanding their own personal theological history, understanding our greater theological history, and
Beautiful.
understanding where they live on the spectrum of that. So that as we need to evolve and change, there isn't so much wounding, right? When you're rooted, it's harder, not impossible to get wounded, right? When you have community and language to talk about your experience in its fullness, you don't feel so threatened when anything bumps up against it.
That's right.
And so I just see so much richness in the conversation we're having, particularly around some of the internal work that we individually need to do to heal and some of the communal work we need to do to heal. And it's a huge invitation. It's an invitation to heal. Whether you change or not change doesn't matter, but are you ready to heal? And I don't know if I'm not ready to answer that question. I don't know if other people are either. There's a lot of power in being wounded. To be honest, there's a lot of power in being wounded. And I guess I have to decide if I want to have power in my own woundedness. So now we're talking about my own stuff, but this is going to stay with me all week. I will say that for sure.
But that's a beautiful example of what it means to decenter whiteness in Black space. Right? So let's imagine if the three of us, Aisha, Kiana Danae, and I were in a caucus right now, I would say, wow, have you read Tony Dade Bambara's book, Salt? It's going to break you. So make sure you have tissues and a vacation. But she's asking exactly that. Are you living in your tears? Are you living in healing? And this is the brutal truth of what that looks like, right? Okay. I'm going to use just myself as an example because I'm not looking to put anybody's business in the street. If we were in a caucus, I would say, what was the co-presidency like? Wow, we chose 3 Black leaders who were as light-skinned as we've got. In fact, all 3 of us are the exact same shade. Look at any of those photos of the 3 of us lighting a chalice. Yeah, okay, we called by POC leaders, but boy, did we choose the ones we are the most comfortable with physically. I did this in a general assembly, a 7 a.m. meeting before we went out to do GA in New Orleans. I put our hands next to each other. We are sure enough all exactly the same color. So if we were in a caucus space, I would say, wow, what does it mean for us as BIPOC community that I have yet to see, right, a dark-skinned leader at the head of our movement? What does it mean for me to be a palatable presidential candidate? Which, yep, erases all my experience and all my gifts, but boy, makes it easier for me to be elected as the president of the UUA. I'm not supposed to say things like this in mixed company, but that's why yes, Salt, thank you, by Tony Dade Bambara. This is why we decenter whiteness even in Black space. And if we don't resource each other, we can't do that work well.
The colorism you just brought up, woo! That is something
True.
we in the Black and brown community are we are still
wrestling with.
It is 10 feet away at
That's
best
right.
on a good day.
Mm-hmm. It's true.
Ooh.
Let's be real. If you and I were running for UUA president, we had the exact same experience. Who would get elected?
You.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if I don't know that, right. And if I don't know that, if I don't do my spiritual work around that, I can't represent you well as your president. And I have no business being in this role. And if we don't resource the conversation, how does it get better?
I was not going to come on here and cry. First of all, let's be clear about that. I don't think I've ever cried on this show unless I was laughing at Aisha.
I love you.
Yeah, I mean, have you met her? So, but I think what you just said is so tender. I think that I don't deal with colorism as much as I should or could because it is so tender. But I think when you just said that sentence, it just caught me in my chest, Sofia, when you said if we were both running, one, I don't have the skills that you have, but two, I knew the answer before you were done with the question.
Yep.
I knew the answer, and that hurt and it scared me. And the way that white supremacy shows up in our stuff, even when we're in closed brown and black spaces, is real. Like being on time and everything, you know, there's those little things, and you know, not giving ourselves space to live into white perfectionism, right? It is so real. And so I just wanted to name and thank you, because we're getting to the end here, to say thank you for being honest. Thank you for being real, and thank you for pursuing this presidency with the same vigor you would as if 20 people were running. You are running a campaign that is centered on having dialogue, on building relationships, and is built on understanding the complexity of our history as a denomination and the complexity of our country as a culture that started with taking land and embodying and stealing bodies. So I'm blessed to know you as a friend. I'm excited. I think that I'm still on your knitting list. I might be about 4 years back, but don't think I forgot. Don't think I forgot. I'm on your knitting list. Yep. So just know I'm still holding out for that. And I just want to thank you. And I thank, you know, CLF for this conversation and this dialogue, because I think sometimes they can get really scripted and really sanitized, and you let me be my full self, and you came with your full self. So thank you.
Oh, thank you, beloved. Can I make a correction? I'm sorry, beloveds. This is, you know, off the top of my head. The book I was talking about is actually The Salt Eaters by Tony Dade Bambara. Cade Bambara? Cade Bambara, yes.
No, I just wanted to say how much I appreciate that we could have had a little lighthearted romp with Sofia for an hour talking about like wool and all sorts of things, and we went deep. We went super deep, super quickly, and stayed there, even when it might not have been. Sofia puts in the chat that she was bad at lighthearted romps, and I have found that not to be the case.
Yeah, I don't know who you're talking about.
We were all laughing with one another before the view went live, and I'm really thankful that we went super deep, super quickly, and you stayed super real in my presence. I feel like I've been given a gift as a white religious leader in our movement.
Thank you.
Yeah, I also want to echo that you are extraordinary at lighthearted romps. And I want to thank you for your generosity of spirit, and it probably is it's going to be one of my favorite view shows. I've been on a few hundred now, because you spoke. We talked about the heart, right? What is at the heart of spiritual community? What binds us? And that helps sustain me. I love Unitarian Universalism, and I have my life would not even a little bit be what it is without Unitarian Universalism. So it's been super worth it, and you have been a big part of that, Sofia. All of you on here, and Sofia especially. Because you have always been supportive, and not just that, but just and tells the truth. So please know, Sofia is one of the people in my life who tells me the truth, whether or not I want to hear it. Thank you.
Same. That is reciprocal.
Is there, in the last 4 minutes, Sofia, is there anything you would like that hasn't been said that you would like to say? The floor is most definitely yours.
Wow. Thank you for going deep with me. And, you know, I get asked a lot, what new shiny things do I want to bring to Unitarian Universalism? And I want to say that, so yes, my campaign is focused on relationship, it's focused on conversation, it's focused on talking about what's really live in Unitarian Universalism right now. For me, what is live in Unitarian Universalism right now is figuring out how we want to go forward together. Right? We are emerging from an ongoing, we're emerging from quarantine of an ongoing pandemic. We are figuring out what our communities are going to look like over these coming years. We're figuring out what new and innovative expressions of Unitarian Universalism might be. For me, this isn't, here's my one shiny idea. My call to the presidency is showing up for the work in a really difficult time. This is a difficult time, right? We're doing the work of widening the circle of concern. We are working on Article 2. We are responding to the rise of fascism in this country. We are trying to meet the needs of communities, and we are trying to deal with uncertainty that has been impacting us in a different way for years now. What I want is to be a Unitarian Universalist with the rest of you, and to bring the skills that I have to resourcing that faithful work as best as we can. That is my top priority. And it's going to look like a lot of things over this 6 years. But I'm hoping that folks will show up for that work with me. You did once before. I know you can. I cannot do this work alone. No one can. And I think that the world needs our values and our message right now, which is not about celebrating, that we are better than everyone else. No, it's we cannot avoid the requirements of our faith in these times. How do we hold one another with love and compassion and care as we show up to the world as it is today? That's the work, and I pray you will join me in it.
Well, that's a word. Thank you. Thank you all for being with us. So much love for everyone. And I love when we have shows that leave me with hope. And so thank you. And to my colleagues of color, I will see you from Seattle in Atlanta, because I will be joining online. And next week's View will also be an amazing one. It'll be on fat liberation. Yay. Much love and ciao. See you next week, all. Thank you for joining us. Special thanks to those of you who give generously to this ministry. It is because of you that this ministry is possible. You can click the link in the description to give now, or visit clfuu.org/give for more information. We hope you will join us next week for another episode of The View.